Hello, everyone, and welcome to the People Strategy Forum. So we have a very important topic today. It's called the culture reset and why fairness is your hidden performance engine. So we're going to be talking to Celeste, who's a former chief diversity and inclusion officer who now runs a consulting practice focused on helping organizations integrate more inclusive practices into their people strategies and business operations. We're going to talk about a couple things, specifically where equity and bias creeps into policies and procedures and how to ensure to work those out in an organization. And also it created a culture where that diversity brings innovation and performance and so forth. So Celeste has a wealth of experience in this area and is excited to share her insights and practical insights. And so let's welcome Celeste. Welcome, Celeste.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes. Yeah. So for first of all, Celeste, we would just love to hear a little bit more about you and your background so the audience understands where you come from. So I know that you've spent years on leading global DEI programs and so forth. And can you tell us a little bit how you've gotten there?
Yeah, I'm from a small steel mill town in Western Pennsylvania, and my father was the first Black teacher, first Black principal in that area. And so I grew up with a front row seat at the dinner table each night when my mother would ask, "Hey, honey, how was your day?" And I would hear from him, what were some of the challenges that he faced being the first, and then not just the challenges, but what he did to overcome them. And that's kind of how I was brought up. It's yes, we know that there are challenges, but what are you going to do about it?
Hmm.
So that was ingrained in me as a child and then throughout my formative years as well, and leading into the various roles that I've had. I was first a reporter, went to undergraduate, worked as a reporter for about 3 years down in Lexington, Kentucky. I went to
Mhm.
school at the University of Kentucky. Got tired of eating ramen noodles and not making any money, and so I went back to grad school and found the found human resources.
Yeah.
And what I liked about it was being able to really look at organizations and say, how do we maximize their performance through the people? And it fit hand to glove to me. And
Mhm.
so my career started in General Foods and then Kraft Foods, and went to a lot of different holding companies within that company. And then Merck came a calling, and I started working there across the commercial organization, the manufacturing organization, also the R&D, and some of the corporate staffs. And then um, I was there for 28 years. The last 10 years was as the company's chief diversity and inclusion officer. And it's something that I didn't really want to do because I was very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And wherever I went, whatever role I had, I was very successful in integrating it into the people practices, policies, procedures in that area of the company that I was responsible for. And I was having a good old time. And then our CEO at the time, Ken Frazier, asked me to take over the role. And we had a good conversation about it. And so I walked out of his office that day as the new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the company. And it has been a journey, a wonderful, wonderful learning journey for me. And then just this past, after 10 years, I retired this year and started doing consulting in the same area of diversity and inclusion. So taking that knowledge, not just of the last 10 years, but over the decades of change management and integrating it into not just the people and culture side, but also into the business side as well. And just parlay that into being able to help others and trying to drive the same thing.
And so in 2025, of course, where the narrative around diversity, equity, and inclusion has changed significantly over the past few years. And how have you adjusted your practice in this new context?
Yeah, I make sure that it's a global framework, first of all. And so if the organization has a global framework, then the strategic framework can be leveraged wherever the person is around the country, whatever part of the business that they're in. And so you want to focus in the areas of people and culture. You want to focus in the area of business as well. And then what I have done over the course of this evolution, and I mean, it's been over the 10 years, a pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, the social unrest, even going back before that, the Me Too and everything that was going on during the time, xenophobia, the anti-LGBTQ plus, and the things that were happening in the area of disability. All of those things contributed to it being a challenging 10 years, but also a very fulfilling 10 years. And what I would make sure that I was doing is we created an evolution of a strategy back in 2018, 2019, and making sure that it would stand the test of time. And so again, you want to make sure that it's a framework that everyone can understand and feel like, yeah, that's locally relevant in our country. We can grab hold of that, and we know what we need to do in those areas. But that is still relevant in the United States. So we know that there's been this sort of pulling away of and pulling away or lack of understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion really is. And so making sure that people understand it, that they understand what it is and what it isn't. They understand the importance of it to creating a culture of empowerment for employees so they're innovative, creative, and can do what we need them to do for the sake of the mission and the vision of the organization. And then also helping people to adapt and maneuver in the environment, whichever the way the environment is moving. Because history tells us, Sam, that whenever there has been a time of social activism in any country, not just the United States, but any country, that when there's that period, the pendulum usually swings in the next few years to more of a conservative stance in that particular country. And history has shown that over and over and over again. And so it's no surprise that we are where we are, but we have to make sure that we're doing what we need to do that benefits the people in the organization, the employees, all of them, no matter where they sit. And then we're creating that culture where they can thrive, both personally, professionally, and for the organization to thrive. And that's what's important, and that's where we focus. And what I like to say is equity is good leadership, it's good management, and it's good business. And I like to take an inside out view as opposed to diversity, equity, inclusion being on the outside of the organization trying to pound its way in. If you start from the center and think about, as you are developing people strategies, people policies, business strategies, as you are developing them, and if you do it with the mindset of it needs to be inclusive of the employees, if it's a business strategy, it needs to be inclusive of all of your customers, regardless of the segmentation or the community that they're from, in order for the organization to be successful. And so you start in the center first and then build out.
That's perfect. A perfect segue for the next piece here and really digging in and where can companies truly make a difference. And so let's start with the talent systems. And so what are the most common blind spots or equity blind spots that an organization has in hiring and performance management or development?
I think one of the blind spots is that they look at diversity, equity, and inclusions, and especially equity, as you're giving preferential treatment to one group over another. And that's not what it's about. And I like to use the fence and the rock analogy in my book, The Truth About Equity. And everyone's seen it. It's from Deloitte. They created it. But I like to use it from the standpoint of it clearly explains the difference between equality and equity. But in that first illustration, everyone's standing on one rock, and the person on the right can barely see over the fence. The person in the middle can barely see over the fence. The person on the right can't see over the fence at all. And the person on the left can clearly see over the fence. And then you get to the middle illustration, and we've given the person on the right two additional rocks. There's three rocks there. The person in the middle has two, and the person on the left still has one. Well, those rocks are acts of equity that you need to give those persons so they can see over the fence. And in my analogy, that fence represents all of the isms, the racism, sexism, homophobia, all of those xenophobia, all of those things that they didn't crop up overnight. And it's going to take a longer term strategy to try to dismantle. And so what's happening in today's world, that person that was standing on one rock is looking to their right and they're saying, well, how come they have three rocks and they have two rocks and I still just have one? That's not fair. That's preferential treatment. And what they don't understand is that that fence is there. And because they've been able to see over that fence, they don't understand the isms. They don't understand how that manifests itself to his colleagues to the right in the organization, in how that manifests itself in behaviors and exclusive practices and policies and procedures. And so what we have to do is we have to, when you talk about organizational change, you have to really take a multi-pronged approach. You have to put the acts of equity in place. Those are the short-term, mid-term solutions. You have to tear the fence down with the longer-term strategies. And then you also have to have conversations with that individual standing on one rock to say, the reason why this is happening is because that fence is there. Help them to understand that fence. And then not just from an intellectual standpoint, but getting them to be active allies and getting in the boat, grabbing an oar and helping to row. And so the ships, all the ships in the fleet are going in the same direction, because it's going to take as many people as possible to be able to cause that change that we want to see in organizations. So that is a misperception. They're seeing it as preferential treatment, and we have to make sure that they understand that that's not what it's about. It's about everyone having the access to opportunities, because once you get to that third illustration, the rocks are gone, the fence is down, and everybody can see the beautiful mountains. And even the person standing on one rock, once the fence is torn down, they're able to see, a wider vision, because they could see over the top of the fence, but now they can see the bottom of the forest and the flowers and everything else. And that's where it benefits everybody. So that's a big misconception that they have.
So as I understand here, I mean, of course, we're talking about that bias that certain groups has to overcome to be able to operate and meet the same performance standards that the entire company has for all employees. So when we think about those mechanisms that can be put in policies that help all of our people perform at the same level, what are the things that some practical advice you can give us, for instance, starting at the hiring area?
So one of the things I think is really important is you have to try to take, because we're all biased, right? All of us, we're human beings. We have inherent biases. You can't walk away from that, and you can't deny that. So what we have to do is try to take the bias as much as we can out of the practices and the policies and procedures. So from the hiring standpoint, a pragmatic practice is, first of all, when you start with sourcing, where are you getting the candidates from? Make sure that you're getting candidates, not lowering the quality of the candidates, right? But getting candidates from all walks of life. You're going to different career fairs. You're going and participating in different trade associations. You're going to different parts. You're going to historically Black colleges and communities and universities. You're going to the Latino community. You're going to the veterans community. You're going to various different communities and places where you can get the most and the best qualified candidates across a variety of different dimensions of diversity. So that's the first thing. You can't just post an ad in a paper or somewhere and just say, oh, when we build it, they will come. You have to, let me put it, you can't be lazy about it. You have to go and fish from different ponds. The second thing is, when you get the candidates in, you need to make sure that you can try to take bias out of the selection process as best you can. One of the ways, a lot of companies, they interview, so the candidate comes in, you interview with Joe, and then you leave his office and you interview with Jane, and then you leave her office and then you interview with Bill, and et cetera, et cetera. But if you would institute panel interviews where you have all of the interviewers together at the same time interviewing the candidate, not to put the candidate on the spot, but what it does is you're hearing, you each have structured interview guides as well. So interviewers are all asking the same question of all of the candidates that come in, and you're all hearing it at the same time, the answers from the candidate. And then when you are having discussions about the candidates, you can challenge each other. You can have a better conversation. We could just call them wrap up sessions, interview wrap up sessions. You can have a better conversation because you were all there at the same time. And it's not a matter of, oh, well, when he was interviewing with me, he said XYZ. Oh, well, when he was interviewing with me, he said,
Mhm.
CDF. And so you're all there together and you can challenge each other's assumptions and biases as well because you're all hearing the same thing from all of the candidates. You've asked them all the same questions, and it's very disciplined in the process. And it allows for you to take some of the bias out when you have the structured process like that. So those are just a couple of things.
So what I often hear from my clients is that finding candidates is easy. Finding qualified candidates is a little harder, or a
Hmm.
lot harder. But with AI in the marketplace now, and with a lot of recruiting tools, I mean, they're basically finding just a mass of candidates through just candidates are using AI, and employers are using AI, and
Hmm.
suddenly they have 1,000 people in there to review and sort through. And so is that in your definition, as you started out with, is that kind of the lazy route? I mean, should they be doing more?
I think you should be doing more. I
Yeah.
think that getting out, you can't rely on AI. Artificial intelligence is supposed to enhance the human intelligence,
Mm.
not be the human intelligence. The algorithms that are created are essentially created by human beings, and those human beings have biases. And so I think it can augment the selection process, but there's nothing as good as recruiters and talent acquisition specialists and leaders going out into the communities and recruiting from that standpoint. Another thing that it does also is it creates relationships with those communities that you can leverage for not just for that particular opening, but for ongoing openings that you might have in your organization. And when you develop those relationships, they can tell you what other ponds you can fish in as well to get qualified recruits. So they know the communities, they know where the candidates are. And so being able to have those interactions with them helps to build trust and build relationships. It's like, university relations. Sometimes people say, oh, we're if organizations are having a hiring freeze, for example, and they say, okay, well, we're not going to go on campus. Well, that's the worst thing that you can do because it takes a long time to develop a relationship with a university. And when you stop going there just because you don't have openings, there are other things that you could be doing to continue that relationship with the university. You could be sending scientists there to talk to students. You could be sending leaders there to talk during career workshops and things like that, and sending recruiters there to talk about what's the best way to put your best foot forward in the interview process. There's things that you could be doing to develop that relationship. And it's very, very important that you continue to do that. And it's the same for the various different communities that you want to make sure that you are able to recruit from.
I love that. I think that's a big blind spot for a lot of organizations is thinking, they're thinking about people as things that you have to, even if you're not hiring, you need to make sure that you keep the relationship open
Yes.
and still communicate effectively with your sources of people because you'll need them in the future. So let's turn the discussion to performance management. So how can we work out the bias in performance management systems?
Oh, that one is, I tell you, for the decades that I was in human resources as a generalist or a business partner, I saw that a lot in a lot of different companies. And one of the things that the first thing that managers need to do is it starts not when you're having the year-end review, but it starts at the beginning of the year. And okay, let's sit down together, look at the year, look at what the organizational needs are, where the organization is going, and then look at our department or our part of the organization, and then look at the individual, look at you, and together shape those objectives. And those objectives need to be, smart. We all hear the smart,
Mhm.
measurable, all of that. But the manager and the employee contracting on those objectives. Here's what I'm going to hold you accountable for this year, and not a laundry list of that's the job description, but the five things that are linked to where the organization is going, what they need, and what you're going to contribute. So you agree on those objectives, and you're meeting. I am a believer in the more frequently the manager has one-on-ones with their employees, the better the level of performance of that individual and of the team, which contributes to the performance of the organization. And so meeting with the individual, how are you doing? How's the objectives? How are they going? Your priorities? Are there anything that you're having any challenges? Is there any help that you need? Any obstacles? What's getting in the way? Having those ongoing dialogues throughout the year, maybe having a more in-depth conversation around the mid-year time frame. And then again, continuing feedback all throughout the year because you may need to course correct those objectives and priorities. And then at the end of the year, evaluating them on those objectives. Did they complete it? Did they complete it on time? And how did they complete it? Even if they're a leader or a manager, getting feedback from their direct report. How did they lead you in completing this objective? If they're not a manager and they're individual, I call them individual leaders because we're all leaders in one way, shape, or form. But how did they work with their peers and their sphere of influence? How did they get the job done? Did they have those rough elbows where they were,
Mhm.
kind of knocking people over and bowling people over, or did they were they able to work collaboratively with their peers? So it starts through the whole year in managing performance. And then as you are meeting with your direct report, you're also establishing trust with them. And
Yeah.
the cornerstone of any manager employee relationship is about trust, and that employee being able to feel that they can trust you to partner with them. They know that it's on them to get their objectives done, but knowing that they have a boss, a manager who believes in them, who supports them, and is there to enable them and empower them is is a good thing, and it's
Mhm.
really what's important. And you can't do that if you're only meeting with them once a year when it's time for performance review. It shouldn't be a surprise to you as a manager where the employee is in their level of performance. And it shouldn't be a surprise to the employee how you're evaluating them because you should have been having conversations throughout the whole year. That is an essence of equity. You're
Mhm.
meeting that person where they are because each individual person on your team has different skills, capabilities, life experiences, etc., that contribute to them being who they are. And so you need to make sure that you understand what they need, and that helps you to set those goals and objectives and priorities for the year. Because if I'm not a rocket science, don't give me a rocket science
Mhm.
scientist
Yeah.
assignment, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Make sure that you understand it and you're able to give them assignments that highlight their strengths, but are also able to help them to develop their areas for development or weaknesses as well. So it's this continuing journey that you're on with them. And for me, that inside out approach with equity is meeting the person where they are and giving them what they need to be able to succeed in whatever their aspirations might be.
So as you mentioned there, I mean, when we're looking at performance management and goal setting, it's important for managers to ensure that their goal setting is unbiased, that how we're allocating work is towards a person's strengths and skill sets, and
And
that
their
we're
areas
doing,
for development.
yeah, and then we're doing that fairly and
Yeah.
equitably across the team.
Hmm.
Right. And what other areas in performance management do you see bias creep in?
A lot of times the bias creeps in when they're assessing. If they haven't gone through that
Mhm.
process that I talked about, when it comes time to evaluate, a lot of times if you have a different working style than I do, my working style is I get up at 6:30 in the morning, I'm clearing out all of my emails, and I'm starting the day doing XYZ, and I have a certain working style that I use. And my direct report, their style may be entirely different from mine. It might seem to me like mass chaos, you know, but they know exactly where things are, and they know exactly what they need to do to get stuff done. At the end of the day, you're not evaluating them on their working style because it's different from yours. You're evaluating them on their output. And then, as I said, their leadership style and collaboration, et cetera, with their peers. And so that's one sort of bias that happens in the evaluation from a performance management standpoint. You have a different working style than I do, and I just don't get it. I don't
Mhm.
understand how you're productive, but you are. And that's what you need to be evaluating them on, what they got done, how they got it done, not because their style of working is different from yours.
Right. Good call out.
Communication as well. Global companies really, this becomes a challenge sometimes where you're in a Zoom call and you can't understand the dialect and the accent of your colleague from a different country. That should not bias you in how you evaluate them,
Mhm.
because they probably can't understand you as well either. That causes a problem. Proximity bias or distance bias. Especially we saw that cropping up in during the pandemic and in our virtual environment. And as people were coming back to the work office, the workplace, well, some people were able to come back readily and some people not as much. And you saw that the managers whose employees were in the same building as them, there seemed to be more of a relationship than those that weren't there. And so that proximity bias started to crop up as well. And it's like you have to make sure that you're inclusive of everyone and you have that relationship with everyone on your team, regardless of where they are and how close or from a distance standpoint they are to you. Are they in the same building or same hallway or whatever?
Yes. So let's go into the final category and to in our discussion today, which is development and succession. And
Mhm.
so, where is bias found in development succession, and how can leaders fix that?
It's very interesting. And when you hire someone into a role in a scenario that I call fit for purpose. So I have an opening and I need him for this role, this project, this assignment, and that's what I need him to do, versus someone who you hire in a role and you see beyond the role, but you see that this person, I see them, you ever heard the phrase, I could work for them one day. I'll
Hmm.
be working for them one day. And that's someone, a leader that sees someone and sees not just for the role that they're hiring them for, but sees their potential and the value that they can bring to the whole organization over time. And I think that when it comes to succession planning, especially in talent management, some folks view different people for a variety of different reasons, either their background, their culture, their life experiences, where they went to school or didn't go to school, all of these different things that come into play that make up the essence of someone's identity. they have these biases around it. Oh, you didn't come from Harvard, or you didn't
Yeah.
come from Princeton, or you didn't come from Michigan, or you didn't come from the school that I came from. Those are just some examples. Um, they tend not to view them in the area of what value they can bring to the organization.
Mm.
And so we need to make sure that we are checking ourselves and evaluating someone based on their their longer term value to the organization. As a leader, as someone who you've invested in their development, what is it that they need to get to the next level? And are you giving it to them? Are you clear about what it is? And are you partnering with them to make sure that you're giving them the resources and training, whatever it is, opportunities to develop themselves? That's what we need to be doing as leaders. And that bias happens when we say, oh, we're very myopic about our employees and just see them in that role. Well, I think they're good for that, but I don't think they're a good leader. Well, how do you know?
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for that. So we've talked about a lot of things here, Celeste. I mean, now as you think about how diversity, equity, and inclusion, the practice is evolving into the future, what do you think the future looks like in this area?
I think the future is bright. I'm very hopeful about the future because just from a data standpoint, the world is evolving from a demographic standpoint. It's evolving
Mhm.
from the standpoint of generations, from the standpoint of how those newer generations coming into the workforce and into the world, how they view diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's sort of a no-brainer. It's like my kids say, well, yeah, we're all different. And not just in a homogenous standpoint, but the intersectionality of all of us. We're not just one thing. We're not just one identity. We're a whole myriad of different things wrapped up into one body. And so I see that as hopeful because that's the way they see things. They see things and they see the identity of the person and they see them what they can bring to the table, what they value them, and they value that exchange and the exchange of ideas and learning from each other. And that is something that when we get into the workplace, if leaders don't recognize that in this labor market, they're going to lose out. And so we have to make sure that we're adapting those practices that we've just been talking about and those policies and processes for this generation, for the future, because they're not going to stick around in a corporation that they don't feel valued and they don't feel that the corporation or their manager or their leader cares about who they are and what they can contribute. Because they just want to contribute. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, everybody just wants to contribute to the betterment of the organization.
So Celeste, if we take everything that we've discussed today and kind of boil it down to make it really simple for our leaders that are listening in, what is the one thing that a leader can take action on tomorrow to advance fairness in their company? What should that be?
I think the best thing that they can do, if they're not already doing it, is sitting down with their employees and understanding each and every one of them on their team, their direct reports, understanding their strengths, their areas for development, their skills or capabilities, their life experiences, what they're going through, and how that contributes to them being the best performer that they can be within the organization on your team. That is on the individual manager. And I think that's what they need to start doing, just sitting down and having conversations with their direct report and really having a great dialogue on those different areas. That's easy yet complicated, but it's easy because you're not, at the end of the day, it's not laptops and computers and spreadsheets and pieces of paper that help to drive an organization. It's people.
Hmm, great. So for our leaders out there that they're thinking, boy, I want to learn more from Celeste. I mean, what are you currently looking forward to between now and 2026? Do you have some resources that leaders can reach out to you for?
Absolutely. My latest book I launched in July. It's The Truth About Equity, what it really is, what it isn't, and why everyone wins when we get it right. That has the essence of the manager equity and action model that I'm going to be launching end of this year. And it's going to be one for managers and leaders, and then one for emerging leaders as well, those that aspire to be managers and leaders. And it's, again, easy, pragmatic approach. It's going to be launched in I'm looking at November, December timeframe. You can go to my website, www.crwdiversity.com, and get some insights there. And if you need someone to come in and talk to your organization or speak about what I've talked about during this podcast, I am more than happy to come in and have a conversation and dialogue.
Great. Thanks, Celeste. And to all our leaders out there that are listening in, if this conversation sparked ideas, share it with your peers and join the discussion on LinkedIn or YouTube. And let's keep this building this higher performing organization together with fairness and equity embedded. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And we will see you next week on the People Strategy Forum.